And we're back with cheesecake. So you're also going to be making cheesecake after your pies or before your pies, depending on how this term falls. You chose a different flavor, so again, I'm just going to show you a few tips. It's not too difficult though, there's just a few things that you need to know. So first thing is you've got your springform pan. So remember, springform has this collar around the outside and it's removable. So if you just take this little tab and you pull it backwards, then it'll loosen the collar. And then of course you need to tighten the collar if it's not on yet. And then I always take aluminum foil and I wrap the bottom. Sometimes, depending on the recipe you're using, if it has like too much butter in the crust, it might come out. So you're really protecting it from anything falling out or anything getting in. A lot of people bake their cheesecakes in water baths. So if you put this down into a water bath or a bain-marie, then you're going to want that on there too to keep the water out of your cheesecake. So first thing you're going to do is just take some foil and wrap that. And you have different colors of springform pans depending on which kitchen you're in. I'm going to make my crust first. This is a chance for you to be versatile. If you are making like a pumpkin cheesecake, then why don't you do a ginger snap? So buy ginger snap cookies or make them and then, grind them up in a food processor. I'm just doing a classic graham cracker crust here. If you don't buy graham cracker crumbs and you have the sheets instead, process them in a food processor. Some people like the larger chunks, you could do that. I just like the smaller chunks normally, so I'm going to process them all the way in a food processor. And then I've got sugar, of course, and I've got some butter. Depending on what your main ingredient is, you might need more or less sugar. This is about 6 tablespoons of sugar in with my 2 cups of graham cracker crumbs. So if you're making monster cookie cheesecake for a lab, then you are making basically a monster cookie dough for your crust. If you're making chocolate chip cookie dough cheesecake, then you use crushed up chocolate chip cookies for your crust. So those will all require a food processor. And then I mixed my crust together. So it kind of looks at first like it's not enough butter, but just keep mixing it and it'll be enough butter. And it's just moistened, so it's not going to stick together that great. I'm going to dump it in my springform pan. This is before I've spread any out. So it's just tossed in there. And then I started to spread it to the edges. And to make a really nice cut, because remember this collar comes off, so this is going to be the outside of my cheesecake. And I really think it looks nice to have some crust up the edges. And I love the crust to filling ratio that way. So I'd rather have crust on the outside too rather than just one thick crust. So you can push it up the sides a little bit. So you can see on this one, I pushed it partially up the sides, but it's still pretty thick right there, and you're going to have a big crunch right there. So I kind of take a finger or a spoon and just push that down, and some of it's going to fall off from the top, and it's okay. And it doesn't have to be perfectly even. If you want it to, it can be, but it looks nice either way. So it's going to go like that. And then I'm mixing my cream cheese here. Your trick with your cream cheese is that it has to be smooth. So we're going to put it out in the morning, a few hours before your lab, but even then it's still kind of cold. It really maintains its temperature pretty well, cold to the touch. So in the package, I always massage it just a little bit to try to warm it up, and then I will put it in my mixer, just cream cheese first, and I will mix that up. Of course, you're going to have to stop and scrape it down, including it's going to get caught right up here in the corners. So make sure that you scrape that down and the edges and really scrape down your bowl because you do not want chunky cheesecake. So you can tell there I've mixed in the sugar at this point, and I've gotten some fluffy, smooth cream cheese. And then in this particular recipe, I'm going to mix in egg and lime juice. So if yours calls for, cream cheese and sugar, then you want to do the sugar after the cream cheese. Once you mix in the liquid, it's really hard to get any chunks out, so you got to make sure it's smooth at that point. So smooth. And then I'm going to put it in. So I have some air bubbles there. I wound up pulling it back out and kind of poking those out. So we're not going to put it in a water bath in a bain-marie because we don't have pans of those size. So I've got my springform, and then I'm just going to put a pan of water down below it. So this is my oven setup. In this pan, we know what happens to water when it heats. It's going to steam. So it creates steam around it, and it helps the top not to crack. So you want that water in there just to create some steam. So I'll close it. Cheesecakes typically take about an hour to bake. And then you can see here, Yes, okay. You can see here, this is when I know it's done. It's going to have just the slightest amount of jiggle to it. Hopefully you'll be able to see it on this. See, there's just a little bit of jiggle to it, not much. That is done in cheesecake world, because at this point I'm going to prop my oven door open, and most recipes call for this, for about 30 minutes, and it's going to sit in there. It'll of course cool down, but it'll still continue to cook because that oven's still going to be hot. So it's going to do that, and then I'm going to pull it out and let it come to room temperature, and then I'm going to wrap it in saran wrap, and I'm going to put it in the refrigerator. And I always want to chill it before I eat it. So cheesecakes are a great make-ahead dessert, because you can chill them, you know, the day before. I always think they taste better the next day instead of that same night. So chill it, and then you'll be able to eat it the next day. And then when you're ready, you just slide this back to pop the collar off of the cheesecake. And then you can typically just take an offset spatula and get it right off of the bottom. But if you don't want to do that, then you can just serve it straight off of there. You can cut it and serve it straight off of there. So there's different ways to do that depending on how you want to serve it. This lime cheesecake I love with blackberry sauce, basically a blackberry coulis. It's delicious. I just didn't make it this time because we just did the cheesecake. So that is the end. Just remember your tips. Your main tip here is the cream cheese has to be soft to be smooth so you don't get chunky cheesecake. That's the end.